The biggest X factor position group for KU basketball is the off-ball guards. They really need shooting from Kohl Rosario and Jayden Dawson. We're going to break down that position group and also talk a little quarterbacks. Could Cole Ballard win the QB2 battle? What's Jaylen Daniels going to look like this year for KU football?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks, and thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, also on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we have our preview of the off-ball guards. How important is it for this unit to deliver for KU? They need three-point shooting, and Kohl Rosario and Jayden Dawson can certainly be game changers for KU, and Rosario certainly can raise the ceiling based on his impact this year for KU. So get into all that and that room preview. We'll also talk a little quarterback room preview as we get ready for KU football season as Jaylen Daniels leads the group. What could he do this year? Who's going to win the backup QB battle between Cole Ballard, Isaiah Marshall, and David McComb? Before we get to any of that, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Okay, so we're going to start with little KU hoops off the top here, and that would be with the off-ball position preview for KU. And, you know, we did the lead guard one. Thank you to the everydayers who already caught that episode. If you haven't already, go back and check it out. So we're going to start this off with potential starters, then we'll move our way into the rest of the players on the roster. Before we do that, though, I'm curious, like, how does this unit compare on paper to last year's unit of off-ball guards? Now, last season, Zeke Mayo, I would classify as an off-ball guard. It doesn't mean that you never, can handle it. Like, it's just the majority of the time. I would classify Rylan Griffin as an off-ball guard. If you wanted to classify Rylan Griffin as a wing, I could hear the conversation, but based on his level of, like the style of play he wants to do, he's more of an off-ball guard than he is a wing. I think you could count Diggy Coit and Shaq Moore if you wanted to as well. But both guys handled it a little bit too. So it depends what you want to do with those guys specifically. Mainly though, if we talk about the top two, Zeke Mayo and Rylan Griffin, I think the hope would be, if you're just talking about comparing Rylan Griffin coming in, what he did at Alabama the year before that he was at Kansas, and comparing that to what Jayden Dawson did last year at Loyola Chicago when Griffin was on a Final Four team, of course, Griffin's going to have the higher, ceiling there. We did a comparison earlier in the offseason, though, and we did go through, and it was like, okay, Griffin clearly the better three-point shooter, but like there were other things that Dawson was a more, would show he's more of a Bill Self type of guy by being a bit more of a complete player. If you do compare Rylan Griffin or Jayden Dawson rather to what Rylan Griffin did in his 1 year at Kansas, 20.2 minutes per game, 37% from the floor, 33.6% from three on 3.7 attempts per game, 2.1 rebounds per game, 1.4 assists per game, 0.3 steals, 0.3 blocks compared to 0.9 turnovers and 6.3 points per game. All of those numbers are attainable for what Jayden Dawson does this season. So with the hindsight comparison of saying that's what you got from Rylan Griffin, of course you think that Jayden Dawson can give you similar, if not better numbers this year for KU. With Zeke Mayo, though, that one's a little harder to replace, where it's like, are you sure you're going to get like 15 points per game? And yes, Zeke, struggled shooting on the road, but he was money in the NCAA tournament. He was money at home. The overall averages wind up really efficient on the offensive end. Yes, some questions on the defensive end. But overall, I don't think Kansas is going to have a Zeke Mayo level impact player from this position group this season. But where it is a little different is I think it's a much more complete position group. You look at Zeke Mayo, and yes, as efficient as he was as a scorer and a great shooter as he was, Zeke Mayo to me would be an even better fit on this year's team, because this year's team, I think they have a lot of dogs and they need more three-point shooting. On last year's team, because of having Hunter Dickinson as your big, you might have needed a little bit more pop on the defensive end. And so I do think you look at it, if you're looking at the defensive side of the ball for Zeke Mayo and Rylan Griffin, and if you did want to add Diggy Coit into that too, that's not a good collection of defensive players. Whereas for KU with Jayden Dawson and Kohl Rosario, and even if we want to go further down with like Jamari McDowell, I don't view any of those guys as being like bad defenders. Like Kohl Rosario, okay, we'll see how it translates, because a lot of times guys can struggle defensively their freshman season, but like his stats that he's put up at OTE show that he clearly wants to hustle and try hard, and he's clearly a good athlete with good size. Jayden Dawson's been known as being a solid defender. Jamari McDowell is somebody who's going to give effort on the defensive end and has, decent size for a guard. So you look at all that and it's a bit more complete there. But again, the production will probably be definitely different. It's also different because Zeke Mayo became your primary perimeter scorer, whereas the guys in the off-ball group this year are going to be asked to be more complementary pieces to Darren Peterson doing just that, right? So if we talk potential starters here, Jayden Dawson obviously goes into that. 6'4", 195 pounds, transfer from Loyola Chicago, who has been a really solid team in the A10. I know they haven't been going back to the tournament like we've seen in all those years that Porter Mosier brought them and stuff, but like they've still been really solid. They won over 20 games last year in the A10, which is, one of the better mid-major conferences that is out there. 3 years at Loyola Chicago, really took off his last 2 years there. And this past season was his best as a junior at Loyola Chicago, 13.9 points per game, 3.1 rebounds per game, 1.9 assists per game, 1 steal per game, 0.6 blocks per game. He shot 41% from the field, 36.3% from three. That was on 7.4 attempts per game. We talk about this a lot. The more attempts you get up, the more impressive that number becomes. And also about 74% at the free throw line. What makes some of those numbers even more impressive, though, is the fact that Loyola Chicago is not a team that plays at a very fast pace. They're 207th. They were in the country in tempo, so slightly on the slower side, right? You maybe played a little bit faster pace or more of a neutral pace, like maybe that goes up to 15 points per game or something like that. And so Dawson so far becomes interesting because I guess the talk hasn't been that like he's blown things away so far. And you can come back in the fall and all of a sudden the light switches on. Like maybe you didn't get it all together in the summer and maybe you will have it all together in the fall. So that'll be the hope with how this thing works. So when you look at the position and the role on the team, I think position wise, you're looking at him playing the 2 and the 3 for KU. I think a lot of minutes at the 3, knowing that if you have 2 of Peterson, Jackson, and Council on the floor at all times, there's going to be times where all 3 of them are on the floor, but times are at least 2 of them. Those are your 1 and 2. So therefore, Dawson becomes your 3 on a team that doesn't have a lot of true wings. But the role on the team, regardless of how many minutes that is one of the team's best 3-point shooters. Again, you're talking over 36% from 3 on high volume. If you're just looking at him scaling down his role a little bit and ideally getting more open shots, being not the primary guy like he was in the Loyola Chicago offense, you would hope that, okay, maybe it drops down to 3, 4, 5 3-point attempts per game, but maybe the number goes up to 38%. Then again, maybe you have to account for, okay, a jump in competition. Maybe it's 36 or 37%, but you would take that and that would be one of the best 3-point shooters on the team. And ideally, he's a strong 3-and-D player, right? He's been known as at least being a solid level of defender, but I think the role depends on what I'm about to talk about. I think the ceiling outcome here for Jayden Dawson is he does put it together in fall and leading up to the start of the season, and that he's a starter, that he ends up starting over one of Elmarco Jackson or Melvin Council. And part of that would be about fit, that he becomes the better 3-point shooter and the better complement to the rest of the roster. And maybe that even comes a month or 2 in the season. Maybe he's coming off the bench at the beginning of the year. By the time you get to January, his 3-point shooting can't be taken out of the starting lineup, similar to what happened with Isaiah Moss. Now, Moss was not in the starting lineup at the beginning of the year because he was hurt and had to battle through some things. But by the time we hit, the thick of Big 12 play, Isaiah Moss is playing big minutes and is one of the starters on the team, and they needed his 3-point shooting to balance out with, Dotson and Doak not being guys who were spacing the floor at an insanely high level, even though both of them were dynamic at getting 2-point shots. So I could see that being the case with Jayden Dawson here as well. I think the most likely outcome right now, I think at this point, is coming off the bench. Like if I'm predicting the starting lineup, it is Council and Jackson in there at this point in time for KU. But I still think it could be, 15, 18, 20 minutes per game for Dawson coming off the bench, being at least an average to solid defender on the defensive end, still being one of the better 3-point shooters. I think the floor outcome here would have to involve, does Kohl Rosario beat him out? Whether that's now or later in the season. So let's get to Kohl Rosario on the other side here on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of LOJ is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch makes it simple to review finances with your significant other, right? You can both see the budgets, you can both see the goals, you can see the spending activity in one place. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On Jayhawks. And don't forget to check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. Also, don't forget to check out, we did an episode bonus show talking about David Booth's $300 million gift to KU Athletics. So make sure to check that one out. On a recent episode, we're going to be talking plenty more with KU football, KU hoops coming up. So make sure to subscribe to the show as well here with Locked On Jayhawks. And we'll get to the quarterback room preview in just a second here. So one big question for Jayden Dawson, I think, is going to be, it's not just, okay, can he beat out, one of Marco Jackson or Melvin Council to start? And what is the impact of his shooting into fit mean for the potential starting lineup or KU's best five at the end of the day? It's also, can he hold off a guy like Kohl Rosario? And a guy like Kohl Rosario, maybe he holds him off at the beginning of the year because he has more experience, but maybe the time we do get later in the year, the experience starts to catch up for Kohl Rosario, the athleticism, the potential that he provides. What if he does end up usurping Jayden Dawson? And then what if Kohl Rosario is the guy that is being talked about as, could he be in the starting lineup, or at the very least, is he KU's first bench guard who is providing the most three-point shooting for Kansas? And so I think Kohl Rosario becomes a potential starter who also is a wide range guy, potential starter, potential first guard off the bench, to literally end of the rotation / not playing. There's a very wide range that could happen here in year one for Kohl Rosario in Kansas. So he's a 6'5", 185-pound freshman coming over from OTE, where if you add up his regular, postseason, and Adidas next gen tournament games, all of it together, 15.1 points per game, 5.1 rebounds per game, 1.9 assists per game, 1.9 steals per game, 0.7 blocks per game. So good defensive numbers there. In what can be a bit of an unorganized affair in OTE. 45.3% from the floor, 30.6% from three, and 81.6% at the foul line. Now, there is a bit of projection on the three-point shot. There have been some games where he's really been on, but you're talking about somebody who shot 30.6% from three. Now, it's on very high volume. So again, the hope is with that scaled down, getting better shots as opposed to maybe having to take 8 a game with OTE. You would think that's going to help it a little bit. Another year of progression and shooting, that should hopefully help it a little bit. But I think he's going to be more of a streaky shooter as a younger player. And so I think it's similar a bit, the ceiling and floor that Jayden Dawson brings, where, I think the ceiling outcome here is, the ceiling is he ends up being this really good athlete who Bill Self loves by his hustle plays, his rebounding from the guard position. He loves his athleticism in transition, and then he is a guard that can throw down a dunk, and then he is providing three-point shooting. And eventually KU decides that, hey, instead of having Melvin Council and Marco and Darren Peterson, we need another shooter in there, right? And they decide, hey, Kohl Rosario is really coming on. It's January, February. We're going to get him in the starting lineup. That's the ceiling outcome here. And I guess the ultimate ceiling outcome is, I know there's some NBA draft people that really like the potential of Kohl Rosario, right? Now, if you're talking the most likely outcome, I think right now you would still say, okay, maybe Dawson is ahead of Rosario. I don't know. Maybe that's a closer competition than you might think. But if he beats out Dawson, then at that point, it probably makes you the first guard off the bench, which, depending how you view the first center off the bench, likely Paul Mbia, that makes you the 6th or 7th man in that scenario. If he doesn't beat out Dawson, though, then that means you become the basically 8th or 9th man, where you are in competition with Smeece Calderon, Bryson Tiller for the last rotation spot. And those are different positions. Those are different players. So partially depend on what lineup Bill Self wants to throw out there, how he would want to play in that given game or given matchup, or if he just wants to go with the guys he trusts. But that's why it's such a wide range for Kohl Rosario. You can see a path where, because of his 3-point shooting and potential and athleticism, he does perform well and have that Johnny Furphy moment where all of a sudden in January he is in the starting lineup. You could also see a world where he's just the 6th man and he does beat out Jayden Dawson. You can also see a world where he's the 8th man and he's just coming off the bench for 12, 15, 10 minutes a game and shooting threes. You can also see a world where, Smeece Calderon or Bryson Tiller's ahead of him in the rotation and he's just playing spot minutes. It's a very, very wide range for what Kohl Rosario could do, and that's why he represents one of the biggest X factors on the team. If you get a good performance and good 3-point shooting from Rosario, it could possibly take you to the next level. Now, the next guy is more of an end of the bench depth piece. That would be Jamari McDowell, 6'4", 180-pound redshirt sophomore. Last year, he redshirted. Year before, 7.2 minutes per game as a true freshman, 1.8 points, 1.2 rebounds, half a block, or half an assist, 0.3 stocks per game, 31% from the floor, 28 from three, 84 at the foul line. I think the role on the team for him, more developmental, 2-guard for KU with he would have to beat out one of Dawson or Rosario with experience. And then he'd probably have to beat out a guy like Ginyu and Gala to be ahead of him too. So it's a long road for McDowell, but you want guys like this at the end of your bench that can be program guys, that can be good locker room guys. And I think he can do just that. So I think the ceiling outcome for McDowell is he does spike and he beats out one of those guys and he's playing 8th man minutes. I think the most likely outcome is he's the end of bench guy. He is your, whatever that would be, 10th or 11th man on the team. I think it's just really hard for him to get on the floor with how many guards that KU has. When you just look at having Darren Peterson, Marco Jackson, Melvin Council, Kohl Rosario, Jayden Dawson. Again, if he can beat those two guys out, that's where the ceiling outcome comes into play. But that's going to be tough with all those guards who are seemingly good players, talented players for KU. So I think a good season for Jamari McDowell, if he could even get fringe minutes that would set him up to be a rotation player even more so the following year, like that would be really nice. But again, you need players like this, like I said, and I do respect guys who want to stay and work on it and try to get better. And maybe that's what will happen this offseason for Jamari McDowell. It's not like this kid it's not like he was like a 2-star recruit. He was still a pretty highly recruited player that could obviously develop into something that happens for guys sometimes. So I hope that would be the case because it seems like somebody who people in the locker room definitely like. Now, if you wanted to add guys like Marco or Council or Gala into the conversation because they could be playing minutes technically at the 2 or 3, I would understand. From walk-on perspective, you have Wilder Evers, you have Will Thangfall, but I don't think we need to get too much into the weeds on that one. All right, let's switch over to KU football with the quarterback room preview. What's Jaylen Daniels going to do this year, and who's going to win QB2? Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. The quarterback room for Kansas is one that Jim Zebrowski said, the quarterback's coach for KU and co-offensive coordinator, is one of the best rooms that he's had. And that is high praise given that you had Jason Bean and Jaylen Daniels in the same quarterback room. Now, we all know there's always that recency bias that we're all kind of victims to. But you look at this room, and I can see it from a perspective of the depth of saying, hey, we have a 6th-year guy in Jaylen Daniels. We have a player who I think is overperforming expectations in Cole Ballard, who has some game experience, big game experience, honestly, for KU. We have 2, nearly 4-star freshmen. In the case of Marshall, a redshirt freshman, quarterbacks that are competing with him that just bring a lot of talent into the room. And it's just a very talented overall and deep quarterback room for KU football. Now, I don't know if I'm picking it over like the Bean and Daniels one, but I guess part of that will just depend on Daniels' performance this year. So if we look at the starter, going through the depth chart, it's Jaylen Daniels, unquestioned starter here, redshirt senior. The only thing that would knock him out would be an injury, which you hope not would be the case. Obviously, last year he played the full season, and that was great to see. You hope that continues into this year. It still obviously is in a lot of KU fans' mind, in the back of their mind, though, of like, oh, what if we get back to being, the fully great Jaylen Daniels, the guy we saw over the last 7 games last year, the guy we saw in 2021 at the end of the year, in 2022 and 2023. What if we get back to that, but then he gets injured again, right? That would just be horrible, and you hope that does not happen. But for his career, you're looking at somebody who has the second most passing yards, second most passing touchdowns in KU history. He is too far behind Todd Reesing in both to catch him this year. But 5 rushing touchdowns as well from the top 10 on that list, although Daniel Highshaw could jump into that too. So might need an extra one on top of it. But there's a chance he could finish, second in passing touchdowns and top 10 in rushing touchdowns all time at Kansas. That would be quite the feat for Jaylen to accomplish at KU. The big question for me, for Jaylen, is just honestly the health. Like, I know there is the question of which Jaylen are we going to see. The closer we get to the season, the less I'm having that question, because he's participating in fall camp. He got to throw to his receivers in the summer. I think the comfortability with Jim Zebrowski, I think his type of offense that he's going to run for him, I think the receivers having more yard after catch ability. I'm not actually that concerned about Jaylen Daniels' level of play. Now, maybe in the back of my mind, I'm a little more concerned about some of the turnover stuff after some of the interceptions last year. But like, honestly, I think we're going to see a good version of Jaylen Daniels. I just want him to stay healthy, especially knowing that the offensive line could, it has a little bit more questions than it has the last couple of years for KU. But I am expecting big things from Jaylen Daniels, and KU needs him to have, arguably his best season. Like, can you do what you have done in small sample sizes over the big sample and be that Big 12 player of the year caliber player? Like, that's kind of the big question here. Now, the 2-deep battle is very interesting as well. Who is going to be the backup quarterback for KU? Now, ideally against Fresno State, you get up enough that you get to see it and you get to throw the backup in there. It's only about a 2-touchdown spread, though. I don't know that I'm expecting KU to run away with it. You're looking to the second game, week 1 against Wagner, where you would ideally be able to put your backup quarterback in maybe as soon as the start of the second half. It'll be very interesting to see who that quarterback is. And it feels like right now Cole Ballard has the edge up, the leg up. Redshirt sophomore Cole Ballard. You have Isaiah Marshall as a redshirt freshman. David McComb is a true freshman. Now, maybe if McComb was sitting in Marshall's case, if he had the year under his belt, the redshirt, maybe McComb would usurp both of them. Who knows? It seems like he maybe even has the highest potential long-term for what KU could get out of that quarterback room. But it does feel like for this year, the backup quarterback job is going to be one of those two, with Marshall or Cole Ballard. And with Marshall, you get a little bit more talent, running ability, athleticism. But it feels like with Ballard, you maybe get a little bit more consistency. And that's one of the things that this coaching staff harps on and cares about a ton. They want consistency. And to a certain degree, like, that's why there are certain players who are gamers and they're not the best practice players because they are a little more inconsistent in practice. Sometimes they're just testing things. Other times, I don't know, maybe I don't know what it is, but it's just like you can't have that same focus. And like there's stories about Todd Reesing being not a very good practice player when he was the KU quarterback. And that was part of the reason why he wasn't the starter to, begin the season. Eventually he takes over, right? Jason Bean was the starter for the staff over Jaylen Daniels in 2021. And I don't know if that's because, it was the same thing. It's entirely possible. I could see Isaiah Marshall being one of those gamers that, maybe Cole Ballard's more consistent day-to-day in practice, but, that'll kind of be the big question. Now, it's also possible. I know some people get worried if Cole Ballard ends up ahead of Isaiah Marshall on the depth chart. And from a standpoint of, would it lead Isaiah Marshall to eventually transfer out? Yeah, that probably would be a worry. But I also don't know, like, that to me feels like a decision that Isaiah Marshall would probably wait to make till the end of spring ball in, I guess that would be, the spring of 2026. Because at that point, you've competed with him over the spring. But I guess if he's the backup all year and doesn't feel like he's making inroads, he'll have a better judge of that than somebody else. And so that would be a huge loss and feel like a gut punch for KU. But at the same point in time, if you lost somebody because somebody else just beat them out, you tip your cap to the current player now. Like, you want competition in the program. You want the player who emerges victorious in that competition. And there's plenty of time for Marshall to beat out Cole Ballard, even if it's not at the beginning of the season in week 6 or something like that, or later in the year. That's definitely a possibility. But I do think Cole Ballard gets undersold a little bit. I think too often we cling to the idea of, oh, he's a former walk-on. And so like, oh, this other kid is a near 4-star recruit. Like, that's an indictment of the development. And yet, well, why is it an indictment of the development that the 4-star kid isn't working out when we see all the time 4 or 5 star? I mean, shoot, man, look at like Dane Christ and Jake Heaps at Kansas. We see those kids flame out all the time. You know what else we see? We see kids like Rocco Becht. We see kids like Brock Purdy. I don't know why I'm just going with Iowa State examples here. We see kids like Carter Stanley at Kansas develop into something, even if they're not the highest level recruits at the quarterback position at the collegiate game. So maybe Cole Ballard is just Rocco Becht. You know what I mean? Like maybe he should have had a scholarship from somebody to begin with, and maybe everybody just screwed up. Josh Allen's only scholarship out of I forget if he went to community college or not, or it was out of high school. Regardless, was Wyoming. People screw this thing up all the time. People develop later. Some people develop when they're 16. Some people develop when they're 20 or 19, So to me, it's not an indictment. And if Cole Ballard wins the job, good on him. And I'm going to start reading into it as Cole Ballard is better than we kind of think. And I'm going to view it from the positive perspective. But like I said, it would still, I think, be an open competition throughout the year. And David McComb might end up being the guy, with a year under his belt. So he would be the future guy to watch. And then you also have Mikey Pauley on the roster to continue the depth as a redshirt junior. So, I think it's just who's going to be QB2. What Jaylen Daniels do we get? Can he stay healthy? And I just hope it all comes together for JD and this KU football team and KU football roster. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. Don't forget to check out our David Booth $300 million gift episode, because boy, is that a doozy for KU Athletics, Travis Goff, and Doug Girard. And we'll see you next time, anywhere you get your podcast and or on YouTube right here with Locked On Jayhawks.